I actually don't even know if I'm ready for this. Okay, let's do it.
Well, let's start by saying it's a shit show, right?
They have to support us, they have to support us. It's getting big, the circle is growing.
It's almost difficult to engage with because it's so anxiety producing.
There is huge mismanagement of government funds allocated to artists through agencies to disperse the funds like National Arts Council.
You have the theory, you have everything, but you've never done it all practically. And when you haven't done it practically, you can't make decisions about people who are practicing.
So on 27 March 2021, a protest was held at the Artscape Theatre in Cape Town. And this was a performance demonstration by a number of artists who were extremely dissatisfied with how the National Arts Council, the NAC, had been handling the funds from the presidential economic stimulus package and how they mismanaged those funds. It was really an amazing day. Performers came from far and wide, from all over Cape Town to, perform at the steps in the Artscape Plaza. I mean, it was really, really incredible. There was all kinds of talent, and it's been an extraordinary thing with lockdown that I haven't been to see any kind of live performance, any kind of theatre, any kind of dance, because venues have been shut. We've seen a lot of the big theatres that have closed. The formerly Alexander Bar is now completely shut altogether. The Fugard Theatre has permanently shut its doors. And to see live performance and live dance again at the Artscape was extraordinary. And I don't know how to quantify what that kind of experience is like. So when we talk about things like film, television, music, costumes, fashion, interior design, all of those things are based in art. They are all informed by the work of artists. It's so part of the fabric of how you and I operate on a day-to-day. I put my earphones in and I go for a run, and that music that's playing, that was, produced by an artist or a group of artists with sound technicians. I switch on my TV to catch up on the latest episode of whatever series that I'm watching. That is a whole production crew, a whole technical expertise, a whole acting expertise that have gone into creating that body of work for us to consume. I think this is the trap of the magic that is art. When an audience member, in whatever capacity, sees your work, they just see that final product, right? And they don't necessarily think about or conceive of all of the skill and the labor that has gone into producing what that 4-minute video that you watched on YouTube, or that 3-minute, 30-second song that you listened to in your car on the drive to the shop. And suddenly it becomes very difficult to articulate what goes into creating work like that when your audience, all they see is the magic that is the art,
When you're sad, what do? You turn on a song and you listen to a song. When you're happy, you put on the radio and you dance. When you're getting married, there's an orchestral band playing because you're celebrating. When you are feeling perhaps a bit depressed or down, you watch your favorite movie. All of these things are in the arts. However, we are not recognized. It's so emotionally driven and interwoven in our culture and being that you don't necessarily need to write about it. You don't necessarily need to have the words for it. It's felt. So often in funding applications and things like that, I've struggled to put it into words because it so often is felt and not read, or felt and not seen. To see, just get involved in youth festivals. You see kids on stage over a 4-year period go from, insecure, not wanting to speak, not wanting to interact with anyone, to finding themselves through the arts. through being on stage, through interaction, through engaging with other people. And they don't even want to be actors. They don't even want to be artists, but just being exposed to the arts has given them that freedom to find who they are, find their voice in our society. And that sort of lesson you can't be taught out of a textbook.
I've always felt like it's at the cusp of greatness and complete disaster, and it's never shifted for, I think, for the 20 odd years that I've been in the dance industry and performing. It's always, there's so much potential for the arts in South Africa, there's so much potential for the arts in Africa, but our potential is not seen by us. Our potential is not seen by the people who can elevate our potential to where it needs to be. So we, as creatives, need to understand that we're great, full stop. There's no comma, there's nothing, full stop. And then people above us who are making the decisions, who are funding these creatives, to allow people to be creative and allow people to explore their creative side, and then allow people to monetize on it and grow it and see it not as a side hustle. No, it's a job, it's a talent, it's an authentic gift that has been given to somebody that it can never be given to anybody else. And I think people who sit in power tend to think of it as entertainment. It's not entertainment.
One of the things that was really, really interesting for me when I started producing content like this was how many people had approached me or messaged me to ask about, you know, how do they get involved? How do they create skill? How can they do what it is that I'm doing? And what goes into something like producing little films? And for me, what that points out is just how much these skills aren't nurtured or aren't forwarded by people like those that we place in government. I think this for me is again one of these things about, you know, the magic of the art. Like your audience gets to see the final product and they go like, oh yeah, that's amazing. They have an experience and they walk away, and then, you know, that's the end of it. The experience sits with them for a very, very long time, impacts them throughout their life. But the person who created the art is, you know, moving on to the next project because that's the nature of what we do. I guess that lack of understanding of just how much work, effort, labor and skill goes into producing content, goes into producing a theatre show, goes into producing a track is extraordinary. And so because it's such a highly skilled industry, and the people who are working in that industry are so highly skilled, but they are so severely underpaid and undervalued.
We always had this problem of no support for artists. There was like literally nothing for artists. You know, I remember I would like be eating up my data, scrolling on the internet, searching everywhere, looking for something for artists, and it was so hard. You know, I could find some stuff, but most of them was like international, and that's bad because like you can't find something from here. It sucks to see people start the art. You see great ideas, you see great performers, you see people that just need the right type of guidance to be great.
Well, personally, my whole life I've wanted to be a professional dancer, so it's a space to be able to do that. But I didn't realize until I joined Jazz Art just like how much more than that it is. And I mean, we dance from 9 to 5 every day, but it's a place where it's all about stories and authenticity and vulnerability. We auditioned over a 3-day period and we don't pay to train, which is incredible. to have a free program for a 3-year professional dance training program it's something really special.
Everybody who's an artist literally gives so much of themselves to what they do. You know, dancers rehearse for 3 to 4 months for 4 minutes on stage. And they don't complain that the song is 4 minutes. They're happy to do 4 minutes and leave it at 4 minutes and walk out and rehearse a completely new piece the following day for another 3 months. And that's 2 minutes. We're happy to do that. But now we need everybody else from the other side to understand that it takes a lot to give so much. And I think that's where artists are at this point in time. It's been bubbling over for so many years where people have been giving so much. And now people are saying, actually, no.
I think it makes it particularly difficult when artists are attempting to, you know, build a brand or build a business for themselves in order for them to become self-sustaining and not necessarily being reliant on, you know, grant funding from the government, from the NAC. The goal here is for artists to be able to survive with the work that they're producing in order to make that into thriving businesses that they can actually live off and live well. So just to go back a little bit, the president announced in late 2020 that there were funds being made available to artists as part of the economic relief strategy that they were implementing. And those funds were given to the NAC to disperse to artists. And a call for funding went out, and the NAC had produced contracts for artists who had applied, and in some cases for artists had signed those contracts and paid them the money. And then what happened was the NAC reneged on those contracts. They withdrew them, amended them, and effectively the artists who were paid or who were promised funds had committed themselves to production because that funding was confirmed. And so suddenly these artists who have hired crew, who have hired actors, who have hired a number of creatives to assist with the projects they were running were suddenly left high and dry. You only have to look at the history of how government allocates funding for the arts to understand how it perceives and how it values artists and creatives. So whenever there are financial constraints or the budget needs to be tightened in some kind of way, one of the things that government always does time and time again is that they cut the arts funding. I mean, so in that way, it's not really hard to understand what government thinks about, you know, the arts for creatives, for content producers, because our work is seen as something that is extra, something that is additional, something that isn't a core principle or a core value to the society.
There is simply a lot of shadiness going on and very little transparency as to how the money is dispersed and where the money is. National Arts Council have oversubscribed. They've signed contracts to artists who have applied for funding, and they've offered more than what they have. So there's a lot of questions that one needs to ask in terms of the governance, I mean, of the arts and culture as a whole, but also the governance of the National Arts Council. You know, how do you sign contracts to give away more funds than you have in your bank account? Like, surely that is business 101, like how to run an organization.
With the NAC specifically, I think people need to be held accountable. I think for me, it's accountability. And I'm for constant accountability. You know, I think people need to be put in their place for doing wrong so that they understand that you can't do wrong to people, you know. And even if it means the whole group of people is dismissed, but people need to be held accountable. Whether the money miraculously appears from wherever it will appear from, still people need to be held accountable. People who are artists and people who have been artists need to be put in those positions. You know, you don't know what it feels like to go to 6 castings and not even book a single gig, and you still have to give your mom money because you told her that this art thing would work out. If the government understood exactly what it feels like to go through those kind of things, they would be making different decisions because they would know what it feels like because they've been through it. But many people study the art and never practice, you know what I mean? And that's 2 different things. You have the theory, you have everything, but you've never done it all practically. And when you haven't done it practically, you can't make decisions about people who are practicing.
Look, I think there's always been a problem with the arts and culture, you know, governance, if you will, as long as I've lived, at least, or been in the industry. But it starts off at the person applying for the grant, right? If it's a youth festival or any sort of festival, if it's an art project, etc., they go on to hire artists. They go on to hire stage managers, lighting technicians, designers, costume designers, etc., transport, in some cases cleaners. So it is such a huge ripple effect. It's not just always one artist that is benefiting from these funds. It's a whole ecosystem that is now losing work, or have turned down work because they've signed for a project, and now the project tells them there's no funds. So it is an entire chain reaction that doesn't just stop at the person who applied for the funds. And those are for the people that actually need the funds. Let's not talk about the other people who have applied for funds but are sitting on the council themselves, getting and benefiting from millions because they just happen to be friends with the right people. That's another whole story that's just, sickening. I was sitting back today and I was thinking, why are we fighting for something that seems so obvious that should be done? Imagine an event or like today was a funded youth festival. Why are we spending our time fighting when today could have been a celebration? What seems very logical doesn't seem to be understood by the government.
But watching those artists perform on those steps was really incredible. What we need is some transformation in these spaces where decisions are made about what creatives mean and what value they bring. We need creatives, we need artists sitting in those decision-making bodies, because life without this is just grey. But I'm hopefully optimistic, I think. Did you get that?